My name is Lynn Stoops. I am a member of the University Relations team, and I am so excited to welcome you all this morning to our talk and welcome you home to UCSC. We have another gorgeous day outside. It's awesome to live in paradise. Anyway, so today's talk is entitled Game Changers, the Craft and Social Impact of Game Design. And it is my pleasure to introduce the program director for Games and Playable Media, Michael John, and he will then in turn introduce our panelists. I will also be roving the audience with the mic, so if you have questions you'd like to pitch to the panel, I'll be happy to help you out. So thank you very much for coming, and MJ, take it away.
Thanks. All right, so as you just mentioned, I am MJ. I'm the program director for the Games and Playable Media Master's Degree program at UC Santa Cruz, which is just one of many programs here at UC Santa Cruz for games. And I wanted to introduce our panelists. So on the end is Akira Thompson. Akira is a producer at a game studio called Phenomena, which is located in the city of San Francisco. And also the, what do we call, founder, principal, director?
Yeah, everything.
Everything for his indie studio called Rainbows. So welcome, Akira. Thank you. Sitting next to Akira is Lauren Scott. Lauren is a 2014 alum and is currently working as a systems designer at 2K Games, Hangar 13 Studios up in Marin. And I'm sure that each of you is going to describe to us what that all means. But to get us started, each of them has volunteered to show some of what they're currently working on. So, Lauren, we're going to show some Mafia here. Would you like to set this up for us?
Yeah, sure. So Mafia is a franchise that 2K has been working on for a number of years, and this is the third installment. It's an action first-person shooter, a big AAA title slated to release later this year.
All right, so here we go, without further ado.
All I really want is for everything to go back the way that it was before that night.
So those the men you gonna kill, huh?
Shouldn't have said no.
This city survived the War of 1812, the Civil War, and God knows how many hurricanes. But when Lincoln Clay went after the mob, he inflicted more damage than all the wars and hurricanes combined.
Where the fuck you think you're going?
Sal Marcano deserves to die. I won't argue otherwise. Kill him, but let that be the end of it.
That's not enough.
It's enough if you say it's enough.
This isn't about bringing them back, or even exacting some street justice. It's about making that bastard feel what it's like to lose everything.
Welcome home, son.
Watch as I take it all away from him.
How do I find Alvarez? How?
We're getting ready to fucking kill me.
I was just doing what Uncle Sal told me to do.
There's got to be something we can do.
You are Sal Marcano.
We wouldn't be in this fucking mess if you'd done what you were supposed to do.
This is a one-way road. Once you start down it, there ain't no turning back.
You are who you are. No point in arguing with yourself about it.
That's serious business, Lauren.
Yeah, lots of shooting.
All right. And Akira, why don't you, I think this will be a little bit of a change in tone. Why don't you talk about what
it's very different. So what you're going to see here is a game that I'm a producer for a company called Phenomena. It's run by actually one of the faculty members from UC Santa Cruz here of the new Games BA program.
Exactly.
So in this game, it's just all about making friends and holding hands and exploding. Yeah.
we wait. Oh, what we wait. Oh, what we wait. Oh, what we wait.
Very cool. And also from Rainbows.
Yeah. So for Rain Bros, this is a work that I worked on with just myself and then a sound composer. It's called Stop Thief. It's about stealing. So.
All right.
That wasn't my audio.
All right. So that's I love actually that selection because it shows really a lot of breadth, right? Of like games are these cultural artifacts, and that goes across these a variety of different dimensions. But before we get into that, I would love for each of you to talk about like why games in your lives. At some point you played a game or you came in contact with games and it kind of made games stick with you, and just to sort of talk about that.
From when I was really, really young, I played a lot of kind of educationally games with my sister and my dad, and from that we kind of graduated to games like The Sims, where there was really low stakes, kind of no losing. And then we graduated up to RPGs and fighting games and stuff, and it really started with kind of that emotional connection with the family and playing games together. It really solidified the bond between us, but also the bond between, I guess, me and games. And I didn't really think about it as a career choice until I got here and got into the program, but that's probably where it started.
So you, when you were here at Santa Cruz, you got a degree in what exactly?
Computer science and business management economics.
So computer science and business management economics, which basically means you could have gone over to Silicon Valley and had any job you want. Why games? Why would you go into this ridiculous, silly industry instead of making $1 billion?
I mean, definitely the love for it, and actually the majors that I started in, I actually had games in mind the entire time. I was always really interested in systems and expressive systems specifically, and how you can kind of really tell interesting stories just through playing and inspire empathy in people in a way that other mediums can't really do. So just kind of majoring in two things that were really systems heavy from two kind of different lenses, computer science and economics, kind of helped to frame those systems in different ways and express and create them that way. So it was always games for me, I think.
Is that me?
Yeah, sure. So what about yourself?
Okay, so now that that's not happening.
Yeah.
For me, my most early memories with games was definitely playing my father's Intellivision with him when I was probably 5. And then shortly after that, when we got our own game system because my brother and I were obsessively just playing Super Mario Brothers on my cousins. So my cousin never had enough time to play his own game. So eventually my aunt was kind enough to give us one as a gift too. So yeah, then we never stopped playing after that. But at the point where I really made the switch over career-wise to actually start making games was after I actually had left film school, just because in a game you just have so much more opportunity to kind of like involve the participant. So I really wanted to explore that area and see what you could do with that.
Interesting. I mean, can you talk more about like that transition from, so your background was more in film and animation,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Did you always want to be in games, or was this something you kind of discovered along the way?
So I do have a really early memory of like telling my dad that I wanted to be in games, and then him knowing me that I kind of shy away from math, he was like, "But you'll have to learn math," and then I was just kind of like, "Oh, that's okay." Then eventually I did make my way back around and have tackled programming and stuff, obviously, but. The motivator for that was, what I was just kind of touching on, is that with a film, well, I still do love films, of course. It's like a third-party experience. Like you watch events transpire maybe through someone else's eyes, but you're still only participating in so much as that you're watching. With a game, you need active input in order to get anything to happen on the screen. In order to advance, in order to even see the story elements, you need to become an actor inside of it. And just, I think that there's a great amount of power in that, in terms of like, and what I mean by power is like the power to tell really moving and meaningful stories.
Cool. And Lauren, while you were here, you worked on Prom Week, right? Mm-hmm. So Prom Week is a long-running research project here at UC Santa Cruz with Professor Michael Matias that's about putting the player in the position of that actor in a high school drama, basically. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about your experience working on Prom Week and how you were trying to put the player inside that experience?
Yeah, so I was a undergraduate designer on Prom Week, and it was kind of an interesting experience because Prom Week was kind of a game that you put a bunch of templates together and try to create unique stories based on what the player is doing in the game, and create all these really weird, emergent, unique narratives. So it was kind of like, almost like you had to predict what the player was going to do and try to create a story that was crafted to their play style and their history. So it was almost kind of like a backwards approach where you're not creating this kind of scripted, perfect story right from the get-go. You're having to take the pieces that the player makes and cobble them together and make something that's really personal to them. So it was a cool design challenge. And yeah, it was pretty fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said you're a systems designer now. Can you describe, like, most people I think in the world have no idea what that means. So can you describe what that means and how that relates to like the work you did on Prom Week or all that going forward?
Yeah, so just a game designer in general kind of creates the roadmap for a game, kind of takes all the different elements of the game that have to make it work and create first documentation for it and kind of a path to how to implement it, and then you iterate on that plan and work with programmers, artists, and kind of bring that idea to fruition. And a systems designer specifically works on elements of the game like progression and like the economy. That's what I'm working on Mafia 3, and kind of really like structural things like the framework of the game, and things under the hood that you don't really think about, like how much does this gun cost, or how long is it going to take for the player to get from this level to the next one, and what do we want them to see during that level. So the systems, like the underlying systems of the game. And thinking about a game that's so I guess kind of emergent, like Prom Week, something that is more systems-based, even though the goal was an interesting narrative. All of those elements were systems running under the hood to produce that narrative. So thinking in that way really helped me as far as working in systems now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of systems, so you recently made a game that actually took a very interesting kind of take on this idea of a system, a game system, and another system.
Yeah, I think you're referencing And Maybe They Won't Kill You?
Absolutely, yeah.
So in that game, you are, the way I set it up is you are a black youth in a neighborhood that is your own, and you aren't economically like well off, you're poor. And so what I do there is like I try to reflect what I see as the systems in place in society and make the player kind of move through that. And then if you go through it with an expectation that it's a game, you expect to be able to win. But I've put in what I see as like the system as it stands now, and you're not really able to win.
Yeah, I remember the first time I experienced that game, I told you my experience of it was F this game.
Which is the right.
Which I understand to be your intent, yeah. And can you talk about, Lauren just gave this really detailed description of like how games function with systems, and you actually labeled your game system the system.
Yeah.
And how that worked.
Okay, so in the game, you're trying to move from point A to point B. You're just trying to get from your home to the local corner store to pick up odds and ends. With each step, you face an event, and the events range from just, small, maybe possible microaggressions or things that you could have misperceived to just literally being stopped and frisked by the police. So as the participant player moving through the experience, you have a choice, and the choice is if you would like to say something about what's happening to you, like communicate your frustration, or just bear it and continue to move on. Depending on that choice, just changes the outcome. Not super broadly, but it changes it. And then so I made that game in order to express and share some of my frustrations with the last year, a lot of the black men that have been like shot around the country, and then the subsequent like lack of prosecution versus the police officers who did so. And so for me, it started with Darren Wilson's, he was not, the grand jury was not going to, prosecute, and he was not going to stand trial. So there was there were subsequent riots and subsequent problems because of that. And in my Facebook feed, I had a lot of friends and people that I grew up with that just didn't seem to understand where that frustration or anger was coming from. So I wanted to make something to like look at that system, expose it, and then put you in that position, you being whoever is playing it, so that it could communicate better than I could with words, like why you might be that angry, why you might be angry enough to participate in a riot. Not to excuse any sort of violence, but to kind of put people in those shoes and to share a broader perspective, a broader view of the world.
Yeah, and it turns out being expressed through the math, actually, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, which is really stacked against you, but I wanted to try to reflect as best I could, like, that situation, those series of situations as I saw them. So. Yeah,
and I think to me this is, by the way, Akira's game was recently featured on the cover of the UC Santa Cruz magazine, so that was very cool, very deserving. And just this is an example of how. So that game was featured at Indiecade, a game festival this past October.
Yeah, I was able to show it. Fortunate enough to be able to show it a few places, like strangely enough, E3, which is not the place for that kind of game. I was able to show it at a festival in Portland called XOXO. It was shown for me somewhere in Montreal at a festival called Princess Arcade, as well as Indiecade, which it was nominated for an award. Didn't win, but it's good to be nominated.
Good.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, the E3 thing to me is interesting because what it shows is that the gaming world is embracing this fact that games and these systems of games can do so much more and just be a bigger and more integrated part of the culture.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that also even in the game world itself. So actually we were talking this a little bit earlier about like Twitch TV and these other phenomena. And I was wondering if like either of you, like, do you watch that stuff? Or Lauren, you were saying you try to keep up with what's being played?
Yeah, actually, I play a lot of these games called MOBAs. They're kind of just like online, kind of battling team-oriented games, and I watch streams of those all the time. My sister actually streams those a lot. But yeah, and there are just these huge, like, thriving communities of, all walks of life, all different types of people, but all converging on this one shared awesome experience, and it's really cool to be involved with that.
Do you watch much Twitch?
I do, but what really intrigues me about Twitch is now this I'll frame it because I don't know if everybody will understand. So there's this thing on Twitch called Twitch Plays Pokemon. And so Twitch is a streaming service in which other people can kind of just like log in and see other people play games. In this case, it was different in that, hey, we all know this game. Everybody now who is like watching can type in inputs which will help control the character. So like that is something that really interests me, like how now streaming and like ways of maybe before might have just thought of as just like sharing a game with your friends or sharing games that maybe other people haven't known about. Like actually having a large scale kind of like design decisions being made now for certain games in which you can now directly participate with a game. I've even heard of some games that are in development now where it might be like a Hunger Games style setup where you maybe have these combatants and then the viewers can, depending on who they like more, can now give like better equipment or better items to. So I'm just more really interested in like how it's changing the way designers are making games even.
There's actually a student game being made here this year that utilizes that Twitch API to allow the public to help the participants in the game.
Yeah, I'm really amused by that kind of stuff. So.
And even going a bit further, there are some designers who will go on Twitch and actually just explicitly have, I'm working on my game right now, you should just watch me like make this piece of art or design this level, and I'm gonna like talk through this with you, and like opening up an even bigger, huger like dialogue with the players and fans, and really like incorporating them into the process, and also making the process a bit more transparent so that people who might not have thought of games as like a career or something that one person could do kind of see that process and realize, oh wow, this is a thing that isn't just over there, like this is something that I can do. So
yeah, I think they call it Twitch Create or something like that.
Probably.
They have a whole section of Twitch on that. And that kind of this leads to an interesting question that I have for both of you, which is you can tell me how many times you've been asked this, my son, my daughter wants to get into games. Can you tell them how to do it, right? So you can just tell them. You already heard from your dad?
Oh,
math,
for him it was learn math, but for my answer is more just like make games. And like even if you're not making video games, just make games, really. Like find there's tools out there like Unity, Game Maker, various other kind of things. Like the bar is to entry is significantly lower. The quality bar is still up there, but the entry level, like you can really make some great stuff with just tools that are just like in reach.
yeah, and just kind of like thinking about the games that you really love to play and that really love to resonate with you. Maybe start with, some like really simple paper and pen stuff and kind of like inspire yourself, and also get some really easy wins like at the outset. Like I think one thing that discourages people a lot at the beginning is, trying to go for their magnum opus for their first game and they, fail and kind of fail out of it. But like starting with something small and building on top of that, just having like really incremental steps, I think, is an important part of it too.
One of the things to me that's most exciting, and part of the reason why I've gone from being a professional game maker to now into education, is the idea of bringing new voices into games, which I think both of you represent, which is awesome. But I feel like I don't get asked that question by parents of those new voices very often. I mostly get asked that question by parents of kids who are already addicted to Minecraft. So what would you say to a parent whose kid maybe hasn't already told them they're interested in games that might get that kid like inspired to follow in your footsteps and be some of those, maybe different new voices in games?
So I think that part of the hurdles are also just the impression of what games have to be. So, in one sentence, I might just, tell the parent to, or let them know some resources of games that are maybe bigger than, what everybody knows, the Call of Duty or Minecraft. And Minecraft is a great thing because you can just create and build anything. But, there seems to be culturally just like this impression of what games are and what they have to be that I even have seen when showing Maybe They Won't Kill You. Like, some people are a little uncomfortable by it being labeled as a game just because of like what their idea of game is just very kind of this very strict definition. So I think the way to kind of reach those who haven't illicitly stated I'm interested in this is to show them the breadth of what games can be. So there's like a little bit of responsibility there from designers as well to really continue to push and continue to show people like everything that this medium can do.
Yeah. And also what a game designer or developer can be. I think the first time I thought about actually games as a career was I was grading a class here, and it was a game design class, and when I saw all the students there prototyping and making games and stuff, I was like, they're like me. They're like a little older, but they're making stuff, and it's like really cool, and I guess this is something that I can do. And then getting further into the industry, seeing, really prominent women and other people like me making games, it's like, okay, this isn't, a pie in the sky job. It's something that I could do and that would be really rewarding.
Yeah, Lauren, there's the game industry has been very male, like in its history, and now we're starting to see that change, which is very exciting. Sometimes a little awkward, and I'm just wondering. You just mentioned seeing women as mentors for yourself. Like, how has that worked for you? Are you in a position to mentor others in your work?
Yeah, it's been really good, really positive. There are a lot of ways to get into the industry, so that part, like you're talking about, figuring out the way to get in is kind of tricky, but once you're in, there are a ton of like amazing resources and really awesome role models to kind of look to. I've had like a few really, really good ones that inspired me to like kind of get to, I guess, like higher points than I probably would have without them. Sorry, what was the?
Oh, just about this role of mentorship, especially amongst the women developers.
Yeah, so I've had that mentorship, and it's kind of like passed down. It's something that is kind of like you kind of like have to hold the torch, and if someone does it for you, you have to not just get where you are and stay there and stay situated and like, oh, I'm good now. You have to kind of look behind you and see who you can bring up with you. And there was one girl who I saw who was another UCSC student here who I was able to bring to the big, gaming conference, GDC, in San Francisco this year and just show her around. And it might seem like kind of a small thing, but it's actually really big when you're in the position of a student and you're not really sure of your abilities yet. And I was in that position like my junior year, and I had a mentor who did the exact same thing for me, and it like just inspired me and opened all of these doors and kind of made me realize that I could get to maybe where she was someday. So really
and now
important.
You're barely out of school and you're working in one of the top franchises in the game industry.
Yeah,
How'd you do that?
I mean, that's like a really big piece of it is when I'm really doubting myself or at low points or whatever, the things that my mentors say actually play back in my mind and remind me of why I'm there and like how I got there. And it's really easy when you're in a big studio with a lot of really smart people to get really intimidated. And that's actually a good position to be in, like to be around all these smart people, but it can really make you question your own abilities. But if you've had someone in the past repeatedly tell you that you're awesome, it gives you a really good thing to mentally fall back on. So.
Akira, you're nodding a lot.
Yeah, because I strongly agree with that. So, though my current company, I'm surrounded by these like people who are just really great at what they do. I wouldn't have gotten there without a mentor that I had that I just reached out to when I was in like quality assurance and the QA. It's like game testing. So it's like pretty much like it used to be the entry level way kind of to get into games. Now it's shifted a little bit, but it's still like underappreciated kind of place to be. So I reached out to my mentor, who also founded a game company, like kind of right after she got out of school. and just the amount of help that I've gotten over the years, and then not only that, also like in those times of doubt or those times of like, which everybody has tough times in their career, being able to either go to that person and say, okay, how should I be approaching this? Or like, or even just taking the wisdom that they already gave you and like using it to continue to carry it. It's just so necessary and such an important part. And I'm probably in the past, it was probably you were maybe working directly with that person, but fortunately it seems to be other cases where, maybe we don't work directly for or with that person, but you're able to just kind of like reach out and say, hey, can you help me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought of game development as like an apprenticeship kind of model. I could certainly name like a couple of mentors that I had that were absolutely pivotal in my past. What's new since I got into the industry so many years ago is college. There's now university programs that teach game development, game design, and that's actually kind of new. And in some ways, you two represent kind of the vanguard of that. So how do you feel, now that you're out in making games and in that world, like your background here at Santa Cruz, like how has that impacted your career and your trajectory?
I think there's a really big emphasis, at least in the Center for Games and Playable Media, to be really inquisitive about like what games can be and what the medium can do. Like all the projects in that studio are pushing the boundaries of what games can be, and just having immersed myself in that culture here, it really helps when I'm out in the industry tackling problems to always have that mindset of, okay, how could this be better? How could this be different? And like, how can I kind of push this feature, even if it's in a big game that kind of has its own set of rules for how it needs to work, how can I kind of sneak something in there that's a little bit different?
Then for me, coming out of the master's program, it was definitely like a, like a test run kind of, like working on the projects there and being advised by the instructors who are working in their field also currently. Obviously, once you get to a company, each game has its own set of challenges and each team has their own kind of set of challenges, but spending the time in school still like gets you at what I would assume, at least from my perspective, like I would not have had the same level of quality or attention to detail as I did after going through the program. So I probably would have maybe found some type of, mentors at whatever position I would have landed in, but I probably would not have landed in the position that I currently am in. I'm definitely much better off than I would have just going in, and maybe it could have something to do with like that the industry also now it kind of expects people to go get schooling, but I think that came about because the quality of students that were coming out of the programs. So,
And just selfishly, for myself here, what would you say that the university programs, including Santa Cruz, could do differently? Like, how should we be evolving to better prepare whoever's coming behind you?
In terms of AAA and huge studios, they move really, really quickly, and they're very, very deadline focused. Like, as soon as you finish one thing, it's on to the next thing, and you're also working with a huge, huge group of people that's really multidisciplinary. So especially as a designer, you have to be able, any discipline really, you have to be able to talk to different people. Like if you need this animation set up, you need to talk to the programmer who's going to implement it. You have to talk to the designer who needs it in this scene, and the designer needs it in that scene, and figure out how they're going to fit together, and just like all this mess of stuff. So I think having opportunities outside of the kind of normal curriculum to work with a diverse set of disciplines and people, and making games, maybe not huge ones, but just like quick games that like you make them, they get released, and having that whole cycle with a lot of different disciplines is really important to practice for when you get out there.
So I have a couple thoughts on that. First, I really strongly believe that games are made in a community. So if you come from, a company of 200 people, that's its own community. And then I've both worked for large companies as well as smaller, like more independently owned ones. And in those cases, even though if you have a team that's probably maybe 4 or 5 people tops or something like that, they use like the network of other people who are making smaller games like that as the community. So in school, I think it would be very important to make sure to emphasize that community aspect, because everyone's work gets better in the long run that way when you have others, new eyes, like questioning what you're doing and looking into what you're doing. So there's that aspect of community that I think schools should definitely make sure they keep strong if they have it already, and if it's not their strength, they should work on strengthening it. And then, to my experience, many programs really have this drive towards industry, which, obviously students go to schools for games usually with the idea to kind of like work in the field. But I think it's important to also give a broad idea of like different areas that you can go into in games. Like sometimes maybe you might want to go to like a route of starting your own company and working on your own games in a small way, or maybe like a single developer kind of way, or even there's academics people who they lecture and they teach but then in their own time they're making their own games, which they aren't aiming to necessarily sell them, but they're aiming to add something to the medium. So they're like really just like game artists. So I think within game academia, we should make sure that that students are getting at least exposure, that all of these are potential paths to go down.
Awesome, thank you. So what are you two looking forward to? Like what, you've got many, many years of game building in front of you, young people coming up behind you, I'm sure, trying to do it better. But what are you looking forward to out of the game industry, out of the game community, and just the medium, broadly speaking?
I'm always looking forward to seeing like what is next, like what's the new interesting like mechanics that are coming out, specifically like systems, and as more kind of new unique voices enter the industry, what that's gonna like produce. And it's kind of selfish because I just want to play the games, and like I'm always way more interested in really new novel experiences that like Akira was saying, experiencing new stories from other people's perspectives, and that's really interesting to me, and I can't wait to see that stuff.
Yeah, my answer is really pretty much gonna just copy yours, more or less. But there's always new technology and new interesting stuff coming out. There's always will be. Like right now, the new thing is VR. I'm less excited about VR as a thing and more excited to see what people are gonna do with it. I'm always interested in seeing where designers are gonna push things and like what new systems, what new ways of telling stories. Like I'm excited for the things that I can't see myself. So I'm excited about things that I don't know about, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, I wanted to reserve a few minutes for questions. Does anyone in the room have questions for these two creators? Yeah, we're right in there.
In talking about systems engineering, what type of output do you run towards?
See, can you explain a little more carefully? Yeah.
So you write a ton of requirements as your focus for the developer, or do you spend a lot of time with the concepts
Okay.
about how the movie, how the game runs? Like, do you document every single option or every single display?
So,
I mean,
so it sounds like the question's about game design process and like to what level of detail do you do in documents versus implementation in game design?
yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of both. It's definitely more on the, I guess, idea side of it. I definitely need to frame the problem first, or frame the feature, or whatever I'm gonna work on, and try to get as many details in there as possible. But one thing about design is that you're never gonna get it right the first time. It's an iterative process, so you kind of create this thing and kind of create this idea and make it as good and as perfect as you think it's gonna be, and then you implement it using whatever tools you're using, and then you put it in front of the player and see if all the hypotheses you base that idea on are solid, and some of them won't be. And then you go back and you work on it more and incorporate feedback from players and then make changes, and it's kind of like an ongoing dialogue with the player until you have something you're happy with.
Hi, with VR kind of coming out still in the early stages, do you see the industry kind of shifting more toward that being the majority, or do you kind of still see the TV screens and then the VR games?
Well, most VR systems are prohibitively expensive, so it won't. I don't believe that it'll by any means like end everything else. It's going to be like any kind of other new technology. Like my undergraduate's with animation, so the thing that I see to that's like similar is 3D animation. When 3D animation came around, there were all these people who was like, oh, everything else is dead, but not really. There's still people who make pixel art games with like, a limited palette for NES even that are still popular and still sell well. Like Hyper Light Drifter could never be a VR game. It's 2D, like kind of Zelda similar platform. I think that as the prices come down, the market will expand, but I don't think it'll take over everything.
Yeah, and also VR experiences are pretty, like there's a certain type of game and a certain type of experience you get with VR, and there are a lot of people that believe this, and I firmly believe it too. Like, I don't think everyone's going to want to do the whole, like, I'm isolated and this is a singular experience. And I'm sure people will start making MMOs for VR soon, but I think there's definitely a place for, couch co-op, like being in the same physical space and, like, seeing the other people around you and experiencing something together that way, like having it be a bit more, like, human. So I think there's definitely places for both of those, so.
It's interesting, you both told the stories of playing games with your families as children. Hard to do with VR, maybe.
Yeah. Not as straightforward, yeah.
Any other questions? A couple.
Well, I can just talk. So I read the article about your game, Akira Thompson, and I was really intrigued by it. I don't know if you're familiar with Papo Yo.
Yeah.
Which is another game that she started playing that I thought was really interesting. It puts a kid in the position of sort of defending himself against this big monster who I guess is like a father figure. Anyway, so I just thought it was a really interesting perspective to have as a player. So I wanted to hear about the responses you've gotten from players with your game. What is it called? And
Maybe They Won't Kill You?
And Maybe They Won't Kill You. Yeah, so I was just curious, like, I know you were looking for maybe a particular response, but did you get that response, or how is it different, or?
I would say that I did get that response. Though in some sense the game was a little bit self-selecting. Like, I found that people, if they completely were not interested in the subject matter, or they just didn't really want to think about it, they would just avoid the game naturally. And then those who they didn't necessarily agree with me, but they were intrigued by it, were the ones that played it. But pretty much everyone that walked away, no matter seeming like what level of like, or where they viewed, if they agreed with me or not, did walk away kind of feeling something. And that seemed evident to me from the post-game kind of, which was just as important as the game. There's always a discussion that happened after the game ran. And I later realized like that actually was like the most important part. That was the thing that I was actually trying to get. And so I would say from the people that play it, that was successful. And that's why I don't feel that the online version is as successful, because there's no exchange. It's just kind of like you finish doing it and then that's it. And there's no kind of like a way or kind of avenue to like facilitate kind of like a conversation. So, and then my game wasn't as, and Maybe They Won't Kill You, that game specifically wasn't as maybe elegant as Papo Yo. He uses like this metaphor for an abusive like alcoholic father as a monster. You know, my game is more like, it's this directly, you know. So, which has its place too, but I do admire those that kind of like maybe take an issue and then put it into a different context in order to like make it more approachable. And I see now also why you might want to do that.
So my question's about working on Mafia, the franchise, and I haven't played it, so this might be a bad analogy, and my apologies if it is, but I remember when I picked up Grand Theft Auto many years ago, and it was really a well put together game, lots of good mechanics and all of that, but I had this sense of, I feel uncomfortable playing this game, doing all of these things, and I'm just curious if working on Mafia has any sort of aspect of that for you as well.
I definitely shoot and stab a lot more people than I normally would. But
That's good to know.
but as a designer, I mean, not really. You kind of remove yourself from, like, you kind of look at it from a mechanical perspective and thinking about kind of like what you want the player to think and feel about all of this stuff. So it's kind of like you're creating the content and you have to kind of experience it as you're tweaking it and stuff, but it's more of, it's not, I guess, unsettling because it's something that you're trying to, I guess, create for someone else. So I guess when you're coming up with the concept, you want it to be that way and evoke that emotion. And when you get there, you're like, cool. But then as you work on it like 500 times, you just are trying to get, like, fine tune that response. So I guess it's a little of both. I don't know.
Why do you think those games are popular?
So that we don't have the purge, basically. Get all that emotion out.
So
But-
it's kind of a way for players to experience that in a way that's safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's another fantasy, and it's one that is apparently pretty prolific in our society, just like going out and punching people, getting that aggression out. And there are a ton of other different fantasies, like, Watam and Animal Crossing are another type of fantasy, friends and being in like a super serene, awesome environment. And yeah, I mean, but yeah, I guess there's something about just shooting people and it's like something that we would normally never be able to do, like in our day-to-day lives, the same reason that, like Dragon Age and like, flying dragons or whatever and shooting people with fireballs is probably interesting and cool, and like being, the Assassin's Creed guy jumping all through Rome, like you'd never be able to do any of that stuff, so doing it in a game is cool.
Right. Yeah, I mean, in game kind of pedagogy, we talk about transgressive play as being something that actually children do, right, on the playground. And in some ways, maybe this is an expansion of that same idea. I mean, you made a game about basically being a pickpocket.
Yeah.
What's the? That's pretty transgressive. So why build that game?
For that game, that does have a hidden message.
Go ahead.
Okay, so as you start off as a street thief, and then as you progress through the game, the bank notices how much money you're able to make, and they hire you. And then instead of stealing wallets from pockets, you're now stealing houses from mortgage contracts. So I tried to do the little bit of the Papillo, like hide it a little bit as an experiment. So. But it also, I do just genuinely think it's interesting to be able to safely, in a safe place, without any harsh repercussions, like pretend and get maybe a little bit of that excitement of like, oh, I'm gonna like be a pickpocket, I'm gonna steal this stuff. Like, I, as a kid, thought that would be interesting, but then obviously know the difference between right and wrong and didn't want to take anything from anyone. So in some cases, be able to kind of experience those things can be fun, but for me, I definitely also want something else to go with it because I am a contrarian by nature. So,
Yeah, I think one of the big discussions now in games is around that word fun. Is fun important for games? And I think increasingly the answer is no.
Yeah.
It's a nice optional thing to have for certain types of games, but is by no means a requirement.
Yeah,
for
but is
something
it
to be a game.
interesting? It seems to be the way that
it seems to be a stronger thread.
and maybe they won't kill you, but is not fun at all. Definitely
Correct.
But there's something interesting about it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, thinking about books, like I feel like I'd have fun reading something like the Odyssey or whatever, like some really intense drama, and it's not necessarily like, I'm like jumping out of my seat and, oh, this is like sensational or whatever, but it's really like it tweaks your brain and it makes you think, and that's a type of fun, I think. Like it's just a different way of like kind of scratching that itch in your brain, and yeah, like not everything has to be fun in the same exact way either, so.
Right. Yeah, Papillon is a particularly clever, I think, blend of, it is actually quite fun.
Yeah.
But also has that other thing going on that's quite serious, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe a final question?
Yeah. What do you think of the game like Cookie Jam that seems to be incredibly popular?
What is it?
Cookie Jam.
Cookie Jam. Do you know this game?
I've never played that one.
Is
Is it like
is
a
it-
match 3 kind of?
Or Cookie Clicker?
Yeah, it's columns of things that you have to match.
Oh, okay.
It's really popular Facebook game.
Yeah, that's a whole genre of games.
Yeah.
Candy Crush Saga is probably the most well-known in that space. They're fun.
Yeah, I think those games are always going to be fun because of the simplicity of the system. It's easier to get into. You don't feel overwhelmed by like a massive amount of controls. And then it's easy to communicate like, okay, how do I win this? What are my objectives? It's like the perfect kind of like time passer, like Tetris or, any of those other ones that, I'm sure we all have on our phones right now we could name. So.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all very much for coming, and thank you especially Akira and Lauren for this great conversation.
I would also like to echo MJ's thanks. You guys are awesome. And I'm really just thrilled to be here and meet you guys and hear your talk. And I also have some nice bags of goodies to show our appreciation for your participating today. Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.